Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me once again today, and welcome back to, finally, another Basic Nation analysis, albeit a little bit of a different one. Because today we're going to talk about a nation that actually has been requested several times, interestingly. We're going to talk about Middle Age Asphadel. Really, this probably should be, immediately following a video on EA Pangea, because Middle Age Asphadel is in many ways a derivative, and it certainly follows Early Age Pangea. But it's also kind of very unique in its own way. Well, let me talk about this, and just to kind of, not to bury the lead here, Middle Age Asphadel is, I would argue, the weakest nation in the Middle Age and a strong contender for weakest nation in the game. Despite not being a water nation, when normally I would say the water nations are kind of almost by definition the weakest, but let me talk about why that is. So, Pangea is the nation with, it's like nature and earth primarily, with a little bit of water and astral and stuff, in different eras. A little bit of blood. Pangea can make forts in forests instantly with a spell. Pangea has free spawn in the form of the Maenads. At least in the early era, and I think the early and middle age Pangea have that. Pangea has super efficient Centaur units that have low rec point cost and gold cost, weirdly low for their stats. Pangea has a lot of stuff going for it. Pangea is a very powerful nation. At Asphodel, if you just look at it like this, Asphodel looks like it's basically Pangea. Asphodel has kind of the equivalence of all of Pangea's stuff. Asphodel has these Centaur Hierophants and Centauride Hierophants, which are the same as Pangea's. They have Black Dryads, which are just Dryads. They don't have the awe aura that regular Dryads do, but that doesn't really matter. They're still stealthy. They're not seducers, so they're actually a little bit worse, I believe, because Middle Age Pangea are still... Dryads are still seducers, right? Yeah, they still have seduction, but Asphodels don't. So Asphodels are worse, but they're still overall pretty solid. And let's be honest, the fact that Dryads could seduce people has always been one of the most annoying aspects of Pangea. So losing that, okay, fine. They have these Dryad Hot Hags, which are the equivalent of the Dryad Mothers and have other paths. So far, they just kind of look like palette-swapped Pangea with Death instead of Earth, and this holds right up through the Panic Apostates. The Panic Apostates, or Apostates, depending on how you want to pronounce that, are slow to recruit, cap-only, death, nature mages. They don't have blood, they have death instead. But so, once again, basically the same thing, palette-swapped, right? And then the Black Centaurs. Black Centaurs are literally white Centaurs. They are the same unit. Just palette-swapped. Berserker, recuperation, stealthy, 55 gold. I believe these are the same stats. We can double-check that real quick. 12, 14, 11, 17... 12, 14, 11, 17, Berserker plus 3, Sacred, Recuperation. 55 gold. It's the same unit, exactly. Do the Black Centaurs have a Javelin attack? Yep, they do. Yeah, so it's the same unit, it's just black instead of white. But actually, there's a super important aspect of Asphodel that is talked about here but isn't really shown, which is that Asphodel is a pop-kill free-spawn nation. Instead of having to recruit all their stuff, their Dominion kills population, reanimates the unburied dead, and generates free spawn. It generates mannequins, and there are Mannequin Beasts and Mannequin Centaurs, and there's a variety of free spawn that it generates, like Urmor. Urmor generates the Roman skeleton undead, and then in forts and with temples, Urmor also generates Knights of the Unholy Sepulchre, and etc., and Mound Kings and stuff. Asphodel generates a variety of carrion creatures and mannequins, and I believe sometimes they generate some of the higher level mannequins. I've forgotten what they're called exactly, but we'll see them in a couple of minutes here. But here's the thing, okay, and here's the thing that makes Asphodel a shitty nation, because so far, this is okay. Okay, they have all this recruitable stuff like Pangea, and then they're also a pop-kill, free spawn nation. Fine. Here's the two things that make this a problem. First, Asphodel, like all nations that have a full set of recruitables, kind of relies on those recruitables, to do stuff. Their Carrion Grove, the Carrion Grove produces primarily nature and one death gem per turn, And if we look at the Mod Inspector, we can look at some national spells. We can see that, so they have these reanimation spells, which are like the Armorian spells. They reanimate mages, right? They have Carrion Lady, they can reanimate these ladies, which are undead dryads who are plants. And then they have Carrion Lord, where they can reanimate Carrion Lords, who are Panic Apostates, who are plants. They don't get randoms, but so, you know, and for the amount of gems they get, these are reasonable costs. 16, 35, that's fine. They have to reanimate their mages, okay. But really only Panic Apostates can cast the higher level spell. Dryad Hags can cast the lower level one. And with boosters, Dryad Hags can reanimate Carrion Lords as well, because I think that spell requires, 3 nature, 2 death. So yeah, they can reanimate those. That's fine. But they need to recruit some of these mages first. And like, these mages are actually better than the ones that they spawn because they have randoms. Like, the Dryad Hag is way the hell better than Carrion Ladies. The regular Black Dryad is slightly better than a Carrion Lady. And the Panic Apostate is significantly better than a Carrion Lord, because it has a random, it's not undead, so it's not vulnerable to the anti-undead spells, it has Animal Awe and Beastmaster, and, you know, it's a better unit. But it requires gold to recruit. All these mages require gold to recruit. And you have, like, the Centaur Hierophants and Hierophantides, and there is an equivalent of those, the Carrion Centaur spell. Carrion Centaurs are, once again, undead versions of those mages, which are plants that are sacred and have priestly powers, and that's fine. And they have the Sleep Vines attack. All these have the Sleep Vines attack, which Mannequins have, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a bit. But all of these guys cost gold. And you're a pop kill nation. Asphodel destroys its own income, and it does it fairly rapidly. Asphodel doesn't pop kill as fast as Armor does, but it pop kills pretty damn fast. And so, your income is plummeting every turn. No matter what you do, your income is going down. At the same time as you are, you know, being a nation and expanding and, like, building forts and wanting to do stuff, your need for money is increasing. Because that's the normal gameplay loop of Dominions, right? Your income goes up, the amount of things you can do go up. The size of your empire increases, and the number of recruitments you're making per turn increases, and your overall ability to do things increases if you're doing well. That's how you tell that you're doing well in Dominions. That's the normal gameplay loop. Pop kill nations turn that on their head a little bit because, I mean, a little bit, but not really, because your ability to do things is still going up as you expand. But pop kill nations have this problem that they don't use the normal resources. Like, for a pop kill, for most nations, the primary resources are, like, gold and recruitment points. That's what lets you recruit mages and troops and stuff. Pop kill nations don't use those, like Urmor. Urmor has, as you may notice, nothing here. They don't recruit anything. They summon everything. They get 9 death per turn, and they summon everything. Asphodel only gets 6 nature per turn. They still have to summon everything eventually because their gold goes away. Like, their capital, their gold just goes away. And then there's a much more serious limiter to that problem, which is that they have this lovely sacred, this Black Centaur. They do not free spawn Black Centaurs. Ever. They can't summon Black Centaurs. And Black Centaurs require 29 recruitment points each. And recruitment points are directly linked to population. So in your capital, which is the only place you can recruit Black Centaurs because they come from the Carrion Grove, it's also the place where your Dominion is going to max out quickest, which means it's the place the population is going to die quickest, which means there will come a time, and it will be pretty damn soon, when you literally don't get to use your recruitable sacred anymore, because you can't recruit them. You don't have any recruitment points left. So this unit just becomes locked. All these units just become locked, but it's especially true for the Black Centaur and happens first, because everything else you can recruit in some other fort. This you cannot. There's another thing that makes Asphodel bad, and it's just a case... So what we're talking about here is just kind of schizophrenic game design, right? This is a nation that's trying to do 2 things at once, and they fight each other. It's trying to be a pop-kill free-spawn nation, but it's also trying to be a regular nation that gets to just recruit stuff like regular nations do. And it can't do both of those things at the same time effectively because they get in each other's way. Like, it gets fewer gems than an actual entirely pop-kill free-spawn nation does because it has to compensate somewhere for having the ability, or because the game designers are trying to compensate for it having a full line of recruitable troops. But that just means that basically you get to summon 50% fewer of your summoned mages and troops. While simultaneously, you can't actually use all these units very much because your population dies, and you can't afford to spend money on them, and you don't have recruitment points to spend on them anyway. And you can't, same thing with the mages, you can't recruit them because you don't get money. Then, your reanimation as Asphodel, because Asphodel is thematically a growth nation, a nation about overgrowth and the forests and all the things that nature magic is normally associated with. Because of that, growth scale increases reanimation rates. Which means, in order to get reanimation rates comparable to, like, Ermor, in order to get enough reanimation to be a functional reanimation free spawn nation, you have to take growth 3. Growth 3 is terrible for a pop kill nation like this, because basically your pop kill is going to overwhelm it, and everything is still going to die, but you spent 120 of your precious pretender design points in order to try and stop it from doing that, because growth 3 still costs you points as Asphodel. Death still gives you points, but if you take Death 3, you free spawn almost nothing and your population dies even faster. Which means, if you take Death, like, Death 3 Asphodel is virtually unplayable, because your money goes away, you have less money, and it goes away even quicker than it normally does. And also, you don't get the free spawn to compensate, so you have to play Growth 3. That means that your money goes away a little bit more slowly, and you get the free spawn, but that costs you a huge number of design points, which means your god, you can't have the kind of bonkers Hellbless super god that Ermor can have, because you just don't have the points for it. You have plenty of god options, lots of god options for Asphodel. You can take a Drakon, you can take a Man-Eater, you can take this Carrion Dragon thing, which is actually pretty cool and can shape change and, has all sorts of fun stuff going for it. You can do all these things, but you just don't have the points to do them really well. You really want to take magic because you don't have that many mages on account of barely being able to recruit them, and then having to switch over entirely to summoning, which costs all of your precious nature gems. You could take an Awake Expander, but it would have to be a pretty cheap one. You could take, like, some kind of a weird rainbow guy, but if you do that, then you have to account for the fact that he's going to, like, get a disease and die once your supplies are gone. Actually, he probably won't, because you have nature mages sitting around, so that's fine. You could take the Great Archon, who's always the right choice because he's a chicken-headed giant with snake feet, who is an excellent, inspiring researcher. Like, who doesn't love that? But no, that's a terrible fucking idea. Asphodel doesn't want this at all. You see what I'm saying? It's difficult to get a good design for Asphodel because Asphodel is trying to do, like, 4 different things. And as a result, it can't do any of them well. So, looking at this screen, this is like the lesser half of Asphodel, right? Asphodel is primarily summons and free spawn. This is all your recruitable stuff. Like I said, Asphodel can't really use this stuff beyond the beginning of the game. Black Centaurs, you can recruit Black Centaurs for like year 0, maybe year 1. After that, you can't use them anymore. You just don't get them. So if we swap over to Mod Inspector, once again, these are all of Asphodel's national spells, and you can see they have Grow Fortress, which is the same spell that Pangea has that automatically instantly builds a fort in like shallow seas or forests. They have Carrion Centaur, which summons this guy. They have Carrion Lady, which summons this girl. And they have Carrion Lord, which summons this guy. These are all fine, and these are all, in terms of price, you can compare these pretty directly to the Ermor spells. Like, if we pull up Middle-Age Ermor just for comparison, we can see that, like, they're actually, I take it back, they're more expensive. Like, if we look at Dusk Elders next to Carrion Lords, Dusk Elders are actually more powerful mages. About the same power, but they have Astral and higher levels of death, so I would argue probably more useful overall. And they're also cheaper on a nation that gets more of this type of gem. So, yeah, that's a really bad comparison. Asphodel really, really suffers here by comparison to Ermor. And please remember, Ermor is not a super powerful nation anymore. In Dominions 4, it used to be pretty scary. In Dominions 5, it's not super scary. Spectators, you can get Spectators for 12 gems, which is 1 1/8, like less than 1.5 turns gem incomes. For a Carrion Lady, you have to spend 2 1/3 gem turns of base gem income. And it's a shittier mage than the Spectator is. So, you know. Also, Spectators are naturally ethereal, which Carrion Ladies are not. So, yeah, it's a real bad comparison for Asphodel. Asphodel really suffers on the summoned mage front compared to kind of what I would call the standard free spawn pop kill nation. It's just another way in which Asphodel is kind of the redheaded stepchild of the genre, as it were. In terms of units, they've got like these are all the normal units, but let's look at the units they free spawn. So they've got Mannequins. Mannequins free spawn, and Mannequins are honestly quite decent units for free spawn. Their main problem is they have 0 prot. So unlike Long Dead sometimes spawn with shields, Long Dead sometimes spawn with armor. Long Dead commonly, if you're Ermor, Long Dead spawn with big shields and decent armor. Mannequins don't. Mannequins have slightly above normal hit points, they have 0 prot, low skills, and they're slow, so they're pretty trash in terms of stats. They have this Sleep Vines attack, though, which attacks 3 times, and every time it hits, it does 33 fatigue damage. It is MR negatable, and it has a shitty attack skill. But on the other hand, you get 9 attacks per square. So at that point, Mannequins can in fact fatigue people out. And once they're fatigued out, they can claw them to death, like, okay-ish. They're alright for chaff. Then you have the Mandrakora, which also occasionally free spawns, and this is, like, quite solid. High hit points, some protection, high magic resistance, double Sleep Vines, so 6 attacks at a higher skill level. Still a pretty shitty skill level, but, like, 6 attacks out of a size 2 unit, I'll take... It's actually technically 7 once you count the claw. But 6 fatigue attacks out of a size 2 chassis, 18 of these bastards per square if you can get a whole bunch of Mandragoras together. That is impressive. You don't spawn a whole lot of these guys, though. You also have the Ancient Mandragora only comes from an event, as I recall. The other... You also have the Carrion Beasts. There's a couple of Carrion Beasts here, and we can take a look at them. These guys spawn in forests, and I think they occasionally spawn elsewhere, but not very often. They have Sleep Vines, they have bite attacks, they are faster. These are your cavalry, as Asphodel. But once again, as you're looking at them, you just kind of come across this factoid. They're just not very good. They're okay. They have the Sleep Vines, which are an interesting gimmick. They're all plants, which I believe just had... Basically, this is a tag to say that they're affected by the Asphodel national spells, and I think a couple of other spells. But they're not super good. Like, they're okay. These guys are fast, these Carrion Beasts down here, but once again, very low prot. Not a whole lot of special things going on. They are magic beings, so you have to lead them with mages. Something with magic leadership. And, yeah, overall, they're just kind of there. They're free spawn, they're chaff. But they're even chaffier chaff than Ermor's chaff. Say chaff 5 times fast. So we're kind of looking at this in comparison to the other free spawn nations in the same era. And we're like, okay, so all this stuff sucks by comparison. And all this stuff sucks because it's trying to compensate for Asphodel having access to normal non-free spawn stuff. Except Asphodel doesn't really have much access to normal non-free spawn stuff because they kill off all of their own population, so they can't recruit this stuff. And you see the problem. This is why Asphodel is such a bad nation. So, how do you play Asphodel? Well, one thing to keep in mind, these guys can reanimate these guys, like, as an action. You know, your Carrion Centaurs and whatever, they can be taking an action to just churn out more Mannequins and Mandrakoras. So you can get a ton of your shitty chaff. That's doable. You also have these spells. These are the wrong spell names. Hold on. There we go. You also do have some of these spells that help you. Quick Roots and Regrowth. These are, respectively, quickness and regeneration, specifically for your Carrion, for your plant creatures. So when they're quickened, Mannequins are quite dangerous because they get double the number of attacks and they're attacking at +2 attack speed. I think this is quickness. Actually, hasted action. Hold on, let me double check to make sure I'm not telling you lies. It's not. Oh shit, it's just haste. Yeah, it's just haste. It doesn't double their attacks. It makes their combat speed higher, which is still a decent buff, but it's not like... it's not actual quickness, I don't believe. Regrowth is actual regeneration, though. It says Mannequin regeneration because it only applies to, like, that category of plant creatures. But, yeah, I mean, it's regeneration, like 10%. And, since you are a nature nation, you can also cast the regular regeneration. And because I believe... yeah, your guys... no, they have the lifeless tag, don't they? Shame. Shame, so that doesn't stack. Yeah, that's just really another kick in the dick, isn't it? Like, that, if they could stack the regeneration, that would be something. But they cannot because they are lifeless. Lifeless things don't get regeneration, don't get normal regeneration. You can stack this with undead regen, however. You could take the undead regeneration bless, and your Carrion Centaurs could get 20% regeneration off 24 hit points. That's not bad. Similarly, the Carrion Lord and Carrion Lady, you can stack undead regen, so your Carrion Lords could be regenerating like 12 hit points a round, which on a Fear Undead chassis with high magic resistance, that's not too shabby. If you could forge some gear for them, they might actually be thuggable. You do get Earth randoms on Panic Apostates if you can just get enough of them out, or more likely, you would just recruit Black Dryads don't get the random, so yeah, it has to be Dryad Hags, I guess, because they're not slow to recruit. So if you churn out enough Dryad Hags and get a couple of Earth randoms, you could potentially thug your Carrion Lords, which could be very interesting. Or you can thug Panic Apostates. They wouldn't get the undead regen, but they'd still have 10% regen, and they might random Death 3, which would enable them to do things like Soul Vortex more easily, invulnerability, that kind of stuff. Could work. Or, of course, if they get an Earth random, they can cast Strength of Gaia, which gives them Bark Skin, regeneration, and a Strength buff. And I think Reinvigoration as well. Strength of Gaia is a fantastic spell. So Nature bonus, Regeneration, Bark Skin, and +4 Strength. No Reinvigoration, but still, that's enough. Like, that's a very good buff spell. But in any case, so you have those... you have these spells, Quick Roots, Regrowth, and then Mend the Dead and Puppet Mastery. Mend the Dead is an instant, very powerful healing spell. There's a couple of your Carrion that have really high hit points that can benefit from that, but you're probably never really going to cast it. Puppet Mastery and Carrion Growth, however, are battlefield-wide versions of these two spells. Carrion Growth can only really be cast by your Prophet, because it requires Holy 4. But Puppet Mastery can be cast by anything, by any of your Carrion Lords. And since it hits the whole battlefield, it is MR negates, but you can spam it a lot, and so you will be able to get it on most of your chaff. And fast chaff is a lot better than slow chaff. Regenerating chaff is a lot better than not regenerating chaff. So, you know, in that way you can make your army relatively tough. After that, it's gonna be summons. It's basically gonna be summons. You do have this Dark Slumber thing, which is a remote attack that spawns... This is actually also a random event where mannequins, like, devour a village and then come out and attack the rest of the province. So you won't necessarily, like, people can't prove that you've done this. If Asphodel is in the game fighting you and this starts happening to you, obviously you know who did it. But it can also be random. So that's something. It's not super powerful, but it's powerful enough to overwhelm, like, 5 or 10 PD most of the time. So, yeah, that can be... Dark Slumber can be useful. Every now and then. The problem that it runs into, of course, is it costs nature gems, and everything else you want to do also costs nature gems, and you don't get an unreasonable number of nature gems to use for this stuff. So, unless you've got Mother Okup, which, as Asphodel, I think you should definitely try to do, like, really, really hard if you can, this isn't going to help you all that much. Now, I could have sworn there was a... Yeah, the Carrion Centaur is just a commander. There's like an Etten Mandrakora. Or a giant Mandrakora or something. Anyway, there's this thing that pops up occasionally, and I've forgotten what it's called, and I'm trying desperately to remember so that I can actually show it to you. And it is it's like a two-headed giant mannequin. And I could have sworn it was an Etten. I don't know why it's showing me these things. Why it's showing me princes and princesses of the setting sun. Yeah, there it is. Etten Mandrakora. It's technically a hero, Ambicephalos, but Ambicephalos is nightmarishly powerful. Because he's sacred and he's undead, so you can give him the undead regeneration, and you can give him the regeneration buff spell, and you can give him a Ring of Regeneration, and he becomes just, like, really, really tough. He has full slots. He actually has 3 hands, so he has more than full slots. All of these are innate weapons, so they don't go away when you equip him with weapons, which means he just always gets these attacks, these 9 sleep vines, on top of all his regular attacks. So Ambicephalos is really, really powerful. In terms of what Asphodel has going for them, then, it really is, like... You've got your masses of chaff. You've got this guy, if he shows up. And beyond that, you're really kind of coming from behind. Here's what you've got, okay? You've got death. You've got a lot of death. You've got a lot of nature. If you can get into the death summons, you can make something happen, because death is a powerful path. You have a number of death mages. You have native access to death 3. You don't have death 4, but you want a death bless, because undead regen. Reforming Flesh is a death 6 bless, so there's a strong argument that you should take death 6 on your pretender. Just for that. And if you've done that, then you have access to pretty much everything you need for death. You can trash these scales. You don't need them. You can also trash that scale. You don't need it. You want those 2. You want luck and you want magic. 3, I mean, it'll kind of depend on what you can do. The higher your Dominion is, the more spawn you're going to get, but also the quicker you're going to kill population. So up to you. I would probably say you want at least 7. Once you've done all of that, it's an open question what you can afford. The Carrion Dragon is pretty cheap for you, especially if you want that death. You may want to go for like a Demi-Lich or something. Just something relatively cheap that will get you paths. Because you can take this guy, take the death 6, and then you can afford some nature as well, without suffering too bad. And then you could give like some other kind of bless. I don't know what other bless you would get on there. I'll be honest. I have only played around with Asphodel a very little bit, because to me, it's almost entirely uninteresting as a nation. But just because it's so frustratingly designed. As I've explained, it's just kind of at war with itself at every turn, and it's a huge problem. Especially because building forts costs the earth, so you have to summon them with your Carrion Grove nature gem income. Your temples and labs are cheap in forests, which is fine, but it's gonna be... It's rough. It is a rough play. What you might want to do, actually, is get the death, and then... Blessing Black Centaurs is largely a waste beyond expansion, because you can't use them. So your blessing for your mages and your Carrion Centaurs. Carrion Centaurs are like... I think Carrion Centaurs, honestly, are mostly like reanimators. You could potentially use them to thug, because they have the sleep vines, they have the hoof. Those are all intrinsic. They are sacred. Their stats are pretty shit, but they have 24 hit points. So if you can give them some gear, and you have a good bless, you might be able to thug with them. I don't know. They have 0 encumbrance, which is something. I'm not sure about that. I think it's sketchy, but you could try it, certainly. Geared Carrion Centaurs thugging might be one of your hopes, I guess. You have all these Carrion Beasts. All of these Carrion Beasts you free spawn. So, like, you do occasionally free spawn Carrion Bears. You do free spawn Trampling Carrion Elephants. These are your heavy hitters. Point buffing these guys and these guys can be really, really useful. The fast ones, just because, like, or the Tramplers, rather. If you can point buff these Tramplers, like, that can help a lot. If you can get a little bit of protection, regeneration on them, super, super clutch. Their magic resistance is low, so you can spam that battlefield-wide regen spell on them and get some stuff going. When they're regenerating 10 hit points a turn, Carrion Elephants are a problem for some people to deal with. They are banishable, but banish is very unlikely to hurt them through that 95 hit points. So they will suck up a lot of banishment before anything goes down. But, yeah. It's basically just the Horde, and then backed up with Death and Nature magic. You do have lots of Nature 3, Nature 4. You can boost up to Nature 5 and 6 really easily. So, you've got that going for you, because you can cast, you know, all the nature spells. You can cast... You do have Foul Vapors access, and Foul Vapors does not hurt you, because all your guys are undead, except possibly for your Foul Vapors casters, but they can give themselves resistance. You can cast Mass Regeneration, although it doesn't help your undead. You can cast Serpent's Blessing, you can summon the Tree Lords. You can get, you can use Fairy Trod to move between your forests very quickly. That's easily accessible to you, or relatively easily accessible. You've got those options, and it's just kind of a question of whether those options make up for the fact that you are lacking a lot of the options that other people tend to have in their actual national lines. You can also summon, you know, you can cast Howl in every battle ever. You can contact Forest Trolls. You can get the Lamia summons. The Lamia Queens and Lamias are actually pretty powerful. And Lamia Queens, if you can build up your nature income some so you can actually summon them, Lamia Queens are pretty useful. You can get the, you can construct Mannequins and Mandragoras if you don't have enough of them coming out. You probably should have enough of them already, but, I mean, when you've got powerful nature mages, you can spend gems to turn out a concerning number of Mannequins if you want to. Or a concerning number of Mandragoras, because, like, a Nature 5 mage casting Construct Mandragora gets 11 of them for 10 nature gems. And like I said, Mandragoras are not that bad. Mandragoras are pretty solid. Lots of HP, you can drop Wooden Warriors or something on them. Then you can get something done with that. But, yeah, you're just limited as Asphodel. You're very limited in what you can do. It's difficult for you to really branch out. You've pretty much, like, you've got a tiny little bit of water, a tiny little bit of earth, and then it's just death and nature all day, every day. Your Panic Apostates are really kind of your only way to get up. They can get the Nature 4, they can get the Nature 5, they can forge Tree Lord Staffs. You need some of these guys, and you're going to be in a race, because you need to build these guys while you have money before your money goes away. In order to succeed as Asphodel, therefore, I think, and this is just me kind of thinking, but I think Asphodel has to be mindlessly aggressive. you have to be in a war and winning it all the time. Because that you have to outrun your own dominion. You have to get to places where you can conquer them and have money and have income on a sustainable basis so that you can keep recruiting guys like this. Because you have to have these guys. And you can recruit these guys in provinces with no population left. Like, you're allowed to do that. They don't technically require recruitment points in the same way that, like, troops do. Their recruitment points are different. So, you can recruit these guys even when everyone is dead, as long as you have the money. Which means you just have to outrun your dominion and get the money. But at the same time, since you're a free spawn pop kill nation whose free spawn is dependent on your dominion, you have to have a high dominion score. And you have to build temples to spread it, so that you get more free spawn so that you can actually fight those wars. So you have to fight the war to get away from your dominion that you're actively spreading in order to get more troops to fight the war to get away from your own dominion. And if that confused you, you shouldn't play Asphodel, because Asphodel is all about that kind of fuckery. So in any case, I hope this has at least answered a few questions about, like what Asphodel's place is in the game, i.e. bad, and why. Please, in the comments, if you've played Asphodel, if you've had success with it, if you really like it, if you have suggestions, put them in there, because, like I said, I don't play Asphodel. I don't like it. I find it very frustrating. I've played it a few times. I've played a few, like, little basic single-player games, kind of trying to test stuff out, and after turn 20 or so, it becomes an enormously frustrating experience. I personally think, Asphodel is far more frustrating to play than Urmor because it combines all of the shitty micromanagement of Urmor with basically none of the power. And in a multiplayer game, playing Asphodel is kind of the worst of both worlds because, like, you have the distaste of being a pop kill free spawn nation with none of the respect, if that makes sense. You hurt everyone around you, but you're so unlikely to accomplish anything that it just feels like there's no point. It's like playing late age Relay. You're just a sadder, weaker version of something that people already didn't really like. And so, it's like, what's the point? But in any case, like I said, if you have any ideas, if you have experience with this nation, if you have suggestions, leave them in the comments. And I'll see you in the next one. We are picking back up with the basic nation analyses. There will be more. I am still trying to get through at least most, if not all, of the Dominion's nations before Dom 6 comes out, which God knows when that will be, but there are a lot of nations still to go. Like, a lot of nations still to go. So, we're going to start to rev that back up. We're going to try to have at least a few of these a month. And, I'll see you then. Take care.